This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put South India at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host. We are recording on the 22nd of January at 2 p.m. In fact, last week I said December 15th. A lot of people pointed out it was January 15th and today is the 22nd of January. In this week's episode, we look at the life imprisonment given in the RG car rape case and the death penalty given to Greeshma in Kerala. Second, we'll ask the question, why is the PM Cares such a secretive fund? Even as we speak, our colleagues Bhuvan Malik and Rishika are in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. This is a reporting project which we had pitched a few months ago and a lot of you people had contributed to it. They will bring reports on the port which the union government is proposing in the islands and many more stories. We have to top up that fund, so do check out the link. Rishika is an environmental reporter. This is really her beat, so she's out there reporting on the islands. Now let me introduce the guest of the day to you. Pooja Prasanna is not there on South Central this week. She is on holiday. So therefore, I'll be hosting it along with Leena Reghunath. Leena, welcome to the show, lawyer and journalist and co-host of South Central.
Hello, Dhanya. Nice to be back here.
And joining us in the studio is Nandini Chandrashekar, a very senior journalist. She's also a senior editor at the News Minute. Welcome, Nandini, to South Central.
Thank you, Dhanya.
And we have joining from New Delhi, making a reappearance on South Central. He was there in the first episode with us, is Anup Surendranath. He is a professor of law at the National Law University. He is also a member of the Advisory Council of the Bonnevaro Institute of Human Rights in the University of Oxford. But the reason why Anup is here today is because of what we are going to discuss. He is the executive director of Project 39A. 39A does in-depth research and it aims to trigger conversations on legal aid, mental health in prisons and death penalty. In fact, due to the work that Anup and his team in Project 39A have done, we have got 24 acquittals and 49 commutations of sentences. Sounds very controversial, but we'll ask Anup exactly what Project 39A does. Anup, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dhanya. Happy to be back, but I wish it was in better circumstances, but happy to be back.
Yeah. So this week I'll have to read the headlines since Pooja is missing. So let me go to the headlines quickly. From Karnataka, we have two big headlines. One is 26-day meat ban in a 13-kilometer radius because of the Aero India show. You know, the first thing I did is Google to see if the place I live in is in a 13-kilometer radius. It's 14. So I think the hotels will be open there. But is a 26-day meat ban the normal?
It is not. Earlier, it used to be at least 5 to 7 days. The show itself is about 5 days. So those days are crucial. In addition, another 2 days. But this show, which is held once every 2 years, is now speaking about a 26-day ban. And that is a 13-kilometer radius, which is huge. Very expectedly, Hotels Association have complained because it's a huge hit for business. I mean, 13 kilometers long. It is held in Yelahanka, which some might consider the outskirts, but it isn't. A lot of people living around here. It's a proper residential area. It is unrealistic to expect people to lay off for 26 days.
So basically, they want to avoid bird hits. But 26 days, shops cannot sell non-vegetarian and hotels cannot serve non-vegetarian. The second headline is that the Karnataka Film Chamber has finally formed an IC, a big victory, right, for the Women's Commission and for all the women in the industry.
Yeah, because the Women's Commission wrote in September asking the Karnataka Film Chambers to form a posh committee. There was a lot of opposition. In fact, there was a very contentious meeting held where producers said there is absolutely nothing happening in our industry. It's all good. There is no problem at all. You're the one raking up trouble. But the Women's Commission did not let it go at that. They continued to stress. So the Films Chamber asked for 15 days initially. Then that was extended for another 15 days. Later, when they still showed no signs of forming a committee, the Women's Commission wrote to the Deputy Commissioner saying, do something. These guys have to form. So now after 2 months, from September, it's about 3 months now, they finally announced today that the committee is being formed.
So this will be the third South Indian film industry to have a posh committee. Tamil Nadu already and Kerala.
Tamil Nadu doesn't have posh committee. It has some committee. They're not calling it a posh committee. Okay, the other headlines, CAG report flays irregularities in PPE kit in Kerala, purchased in Kerala. In Tamil Nadu, the cow urine row, doctors have called the IIT Madras director's claims irresponsible and pseudoscience. But he has cited five papers, right?
Papers, yes. We don't know. We're still trying to track whether they are peer reviewed. What the journal says, these journal all say they are peer reviewed, and some of the journals say they are blind peer reviewed. We still don't know though. Some of these are old. There is a patent form that he has released also that some people have taken a patent for it. But it's all out there. It's a very dangerous assumption to make that cow urine can suddenly cure cancer. So it is left for the medical community to protest against it, and
Which is what they're doing now.
Yeah.
So he basically praised cow urine and said it's antibacterial, antifungal.
Somebody in his position should not be doing it, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, from Andhra Pradesh, the Madiga Reservation Porata Samiti is going to hold a massive rally in Hyderabad on the 7th of February. This is against the classification of scheduled castes. And the final headline, Donald Trump, the new president of America, has declared an end to US citizenship by birth. It has already been challenged and it is a jolt to Indians. I mean, my timeline is full of Indians very worried about America not giving citizenship. But on that note, we have a paywall story by my colleague Bharati. It's a really in-depth story that she has done on this whole debate about H-1B visa. So what is ironical is that MAGA, which is Make America Great Again group of Trump, has been saying do not give H-1B visas to Indians and the likes. So Indians are calling that racist. MAGA is hitting back saying, you guys are casteist. You guys are racist yourself. How can you call us racist? So there's a whole race debate happening. And Bharati has traced the immigration law, how that's linked to eugenics and racism. It's a very interesting story. Do go to the News Minute and read. And it is a subscriber-only story. Remember, we put a few stories behind the paywall every month because that's the only way also to tell people that you are getting something out of the subscription. So please go and read that story. Now we will move on to the first topic which we are going to discuss. It's about two different judgments. One is from West Bengal and one is from Kerala. Both states and the entire country is debating this. One is, of course, the life imprisonment given to a man who raped and murdered a doctor, Sanjay Roy. He raped and murdered a doctor at the RG Kar Hospital in Kolkata. The second is a death penalty given to a woman named Greeshma who had poisoned and murdered her boyfriend, Sharon Raj. So we have a very peculiar situation here where in West Bengal there are protests. Even Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee has said, why was death penalty not given to Sanjay Roy? I saw even Brinda Karad and others asking for a death penalty. While in Kerala, we are seeing a large number of people really happy about the fact that death penalty has been given to Greeshma, who the judge says is a devilish person who murdered her boyfriend inch by inch. So I'm going to first go to Anup and then come to Leena. Anup, you read both these judgments. What were the reasons for the judge in one case to give the death penalty and the other judge to not give the death penalty?
Right. In the RG Kar case, right, you see much greater fidelity to the law as to how judges must decide in choosing between life imprisonment and the death sentence, right? And there is, irrespective of what our views might be of these incidents and the people involved in these incidents, judges are expected to decide by the requirements of the law. And unfortunately, in the Greeshma decision, we don't see that. In the RG Kar decision, the judge is acutely aware of what the Supreme Court has laid down as law in terms of how to choose. And one of the main requirements there is that the state must be able to demonstrate that the person it wants executed or it wants a death sentence imposed on there is no probability of reformation, right? That has to be demonstrated, and that the option of life imprisonment is unquestionably foreclosed, right? These are things that the state has to show, and the judge also has to provide in their reasons and has to be convinced that these conditions exist, right? And only then can you impose the death sentence, right? You can't do it because you think that the crime is heinous. Of course, in most of these cases, the crime is heinous. the individual is terrible, is demonic, or whatever flowery language they use. All of that is not sufficient for a judge to impose a death sentence under law. And in the R.G. Kar decision, the judge finds that it hasn't been established that the accused person is beyond, or that there is no probability of reformation, and that's not established, and neither has the state has shown us why life imprisonment is not sufficient, and therefore chooses not to give the death sentence in that case. And the judge is acutely aware. If you read the judgment, and if you read the actual judgment, the judge is acutely aware of how brutal the crime is and the manner in which it was carried out. All of that the judge is aware, but the judge is also clear that there are certain requirements of law. In the Greeshma decision, I'm sorry to say there's a shocking ignorance of what the Supreme Court requires. The judge has committed the cardinal error of cherry picking the judgments that the judge likes to reach the conclusion that the judge wants to reach. Right? The latest judgment of the Supreme Court in Manoj, there are very clear requirements of what judges must do and the questions they must ask. And in Greeshma, you will see there is no answer from the judge as to why the judge feels that the accused person is beyond reformation, right? And the question of the probability of reformation is for the state to establish. It is not for the accused to show, yeah, I can be reformed. It is for the state to show that this person is beyond reformation, and you can't resort to saying somebody who commits such a crime is beyond reformation. That circular reasoning is not allowed, right? You have to have material, and if the state does not show that, then you don't impose the death sentence. Just because you think that this person, and of course the judgment is replete with the judge's moral abhorrence for Greeshma and the accused, and the manner what he thinks of her sexual behavior and the morality of it, and that's so evident. But that is not a good enough judicial reason to impose the death penalty. Look, you and I can have our own view on both of these accused persons. We might hate them. We might think, oh no, we shouldn't use the death penalty. Whatever it is, as a judge, you have to follow the law. In one, you see the law being followed, and the judge saying, I can't decide this by virtue of what the public wants. I have to decide by the law. And the other, in Greeshma, it's quite shocking, really, how Supreme Court law has just been ignored. Yeah.
So, just to explain a little bit of more what Anup is saying, now in Sharon Raj, who was 23-year-old, and Greeshma, 24-year-old, both were students. The case is that they were in love with each other. I think around 4 months after they fall in love, her parents decide her marriage alliance with another man. So she breaks up with this guy, but she gets back with him. And then at one point of time, she asks him to come home, and then she gives him poison. But there is another instance where she's already tried to poison him once. When that did not work out, she tries a second time. So the judge keeps talking about the fact that they had sexual intercourse. Multiple times it is talked about in the judgment. Before I go to Leena, one thing which shocked me is that there was a medical test done on this Greeshma for actually checking if she has had sexual intercourse. I thought that was completely unnecessary. So both these judgments look at the Bachchan Singh judgment. That happened a few years ago in the Supreme Court, where Bachchan Singh is a man who had killed his wife, and he had got punishment for 14 years, life imprisonment. After he comes out of jail, he ends up killing 3 of his nieces and nephews, which is when the Supreme Court gives him death penalty, and the Supreme Court lays down certain guidelines which all judges, magistrates have to follow if they are listening to a case and wanting to give death penalty. So, Leena, both the judges in Kolkata and in Kerala, they have looked at the Bachchan Singh case, right? They both quote extensively from Bachchan Singh case. And what the judge in Kerala is saying is that the aggravating circumstances are more than the mitigating circumstances, while the Kolkata judge is saying that I cannot play to the gallery of public sentiment. What were your thoughts on the two judgments?
One thing that we should keep in mind is that people are mostly trigger happy with instant justice, and there is always an ask for death penalty whenever there is something like this has come up. Even we saw the public in favor of encounter killings without any proper trial that happened recently in the last 2-3 years. Andhra, right?
In Hyderabad.
In Hyderabad,
yes.
and how there was a public emotion in favor of it in that kind of an instant justice where no due process is followed. So, and but the Supreme Court has over and again put down these guidelines so that the judges have certain criteria that they should follow when they award a death penalty. But what we have often seen is that judges are swayed by the conversations that are triggered by the crime on the ground. And if it's often, even Supreme Court itself is famous for giving judgment saying that we have to consider the morality of the crowd out there, and the judges have been swayed by this public emotion. So given by how Kerala is reacting to the Greeshma case, we all understand that how that judge too went and gave this. But it's shocking. Like, recently I had a discussion where we were discussing law as literature, as how if we read our recent judgments, we what is the kind of idea we get about society and how it functions, what it tells us about the current social setup. And I think this judgment is one good example if you want to understand law as literature, as what our judges think, how it plays to the judicial sense of the crowd, the morality of the crowd. One thing would be to do is this. Whereas in the Arjikar case, when we read through, though a brutal crime has happened, right? The crime has shocked the whole nation. It has seen protest on the road for a longer time. But even there, the judge goes, examines it while even saying the brutality of the crime and looking at the reports from experts of how it was conducted, and going against the public narrative, as to how we all read in the news that the hip bone was broken, but the medical reports say that it was not the case. So it was, and even the demolition of the room next door, where next to where the crime happened, and how there was a public outcry against it, but the judgment clearly says that there was nothing in that room that caused for a concern in this case. So here the judge has taken, I feel like has taken that position where it's gone against the public demand and given a judgment that sort of stands to the guidelines put by Supreme Court to look at whether it's a rarest of the rare. Where I would say that emotionally or judicially or in the eyes of justice, if you look at it, that it's a very brutal workplace murder of a doctor who was in a 36-hour shift in a hospital with no kind of basic facilities for their safety or their well-being and all of that. And it's a very brutal kind of a murder that we have witnessed in that case. Whereas when it comes to the Greeshma case, the whole narrative, even from the way that the judgment has started, Malayalam newspapers as you must know, call it a poetic judgment. But what is the poetry? What I know a little bit is that the judge who has wrote it was also a crime novelist, and some kind of that elements come to play in the way the judgment is drafted. But there is an overwhelming importance given to the role of women, and how in future that this would set stage for similar kind of crimes and all of that, and that is where it has gone in favor of death penalty.
Anup, see, a lot of people have been saying after the Kolkata judgment that, look, here is a young woman who was just doing her job, and then while she's doing her job, she is raped and killed. And this man, the way he has executed that rape and murder, that why does he deserve just the life imprisonment? Because he would then be out of jail after 14 years or how many ever years, right? So people, and in the judgment, the judge clearly says that this was a brutal murder. Of course, he says there was no motive, that the Sanjay Roy had not come there to murder. He had basically gone to a red light area. Before that, he had been drinking with his friend. So he was lustful, and this doctor was the one who he found, and therefore he raped and murdered her. But there is a sentiment that a young life has come to an end. So then why not death penalty? Is that not grounds enough, Anup?
So first of all, I'd like to clarify that the punishment is under the provision which says life imprisonment for the rest of natural life, right? Now, whether the state government can still exercise its remission powers under the criminal procedure code, or the new BNSS, is a question that is not really settled, right? So we might actually be seeing this person spending the rest of their life in prison, right? So just to be clear on that. Now, on the broader question that you're asking, that when somebody has taken a life, why can't we just take their life? That is because the justice system is not based on a vendetta matrix. It is not on a revenge matrix. There are certain constitutional requirements that, as you said in Bachchan Singh, they have laid out that when deciding whether to give the death sentence or not, just looking at the brutality of the crime is not enough. You also have to look at the circumstances of the accused, right? And Bachchan Singh was decided in 1980. A lot of developments have happened in the 44 years since, right? And in Manoj, it decided in 2022, a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court said that when you are deciding this, you need to call for certain information from the prison. You need to call about their prison conduct. A probation officer needs to give a report. And also you need to conduct an independent psychological assessment. All of this is speaking towards this person can be reformed or not. But that is what our constitution requires, right? That our justice system does not operate on the basis of an eye for an eye, right? And then we must demand of our judges, and it is in all our interest that judges decide according to their law, according to the law, and not according to their subjective morality, right? And it's all in all our interest. And we all decide our positions on these things, mostly assuming that all of these things will not come to bite us, right? And you don't want to be in a position where judges are being legitimized to decide according to society's morality or their own subjective morality instead of following the law, right? And the law makes a constitutional commitment because you're going to take someone's life. And the truth of the matter is, over a 20-year period, we've analyzed data. For every 100 death sentences that are given by trial courts in this country, nearly 35 to 40% result in acquittals in appeals, right? And a further 55% are commuted, right? And therefore, every 100 death sentences that are given by trial courts in this country, nearly 95% are finally, the appellate courts find that they should not have been sentenced to death. Now, it is a shocking percentage and a shocking kind of failure by our trial courts. And this is the extent of reversal, right? And I would be shocked if the death sentence in Greeshma was either upheld either in the High Court or even in the Supreme Court. But what are we doing now? Until those appeals are disposed, a death sentence appeal, if Greeshma files her death sentence appeal today, the Kerala High Court will hear it in about 4 years' time, right? That is we are now seeing what, the patterns of how much time it takes for a High Court to listen to it. And you have now asked this woman to live on death row till her appeal is decided, right? So, we have Dhanya, I keep saying we should have a very honest conversation, right? Why do we want the death sentence? Is that as a society we want revenge? Then let's come out and have that conversation, right? Even when the Delhi gang rape happened, let's not pretend this is about sending a message to society. It is about preventing crime. We need to protect society. We need to protect others from violent crime. Let's not pretend we know it's not about that. It is about society's need for vengeance. Then let's not have this pretense of being more progressive, right? Yes, we are vengeful as a society. Let's accept it and have that conversation instead of trying to present these false reasons as to why we want harsher and harsher punishments in the name of reform or protecting people from crime. It's not about that. And I just this sort of unwillingness to have an honest conversation that yes, it is a certain bloodlust and let's accept it, right? And we can have a conversation about it. It's a much more honest conversation.
So I was reading both these judgments together yesterday. It was a surreal experience because I read one and then I read the other. They're so different, right? For example, brutality, yes, both were brutal murders in the sense that Sharon was given a poison like paraquat, which takes many days. And, he literally dies in a very painful way, which is well described in the judgment. And this doctor in Kolkata, for no fault of her, she's just like taking rest after a long working day and then she's raped and killed. But the judges, both of them, like the Kolkata judge, looks at, was it brutal? Yes. Kerala judge says, yes, brutal. Was there a motive? Kolkata judge says, no motive. Kerala judge says, this actually is a very curious part of the judgment. It says, the offence was committed with an intention to create fear, psychosis in the public at large and create panic among lovers and friends. I don't understand why the judge would say that. I'll come to you, Leena, about that. Then he also says about reformation, the Kolkata judge says that there is no prior crime record for this man, Sanjay Roy, and therefore there is a chance of reformation. In the Kerala case, the judge clearly says, I find substance in the submission that the convict had devilish thought in her mind because only cunning and cruel criminals can do such offence. Such a person cannot be reformed. There is no guarantee that she will not mix poison again in another relationship. So reading both these judgments together, I felt the application of law itself was so different, right? And also this whole thing that the offence was committed. I mean, in fact, he talks about that people are living in relationships. So this sends a message that girls can kill their boyfriends. Did you read those parts, Leena? And what did you think about that?
Sorry, Dhanya, I want Leena's comment also on a part I want to read out, which is on the magnitude of crime. First of all, the judge is applying just a wrong case law. This is on page 529 of the judgment. On the magnitude of crime, herein the murder by poisoning shocked the conscience of society, which spread a message among youth that a girl can easily kill her boyfriend after having broken the relationship. Nowadays, the youth are following live-in relationships. If it is viewed lightly, it is as good as use and throw, and one can easily target his partner. It will send a wrong message to society.
This is what I said. So the judge also says that it's sending a message that girls can kill boys and live-in relationships are happening, so it's dangerous.
I think if this would have maybe South Central is the only place I can say this, that if this would have come in a North Indian court and we would all be like, oh, North India, and then this comes for Kerala.
Hey, South Central also you cannot say that because we have North Indian listeners. But go on.
But this is happening in the most liberated Kerala society, that a judgment like this comes out. But Dhanya, however much we don't want to discuss the gender angle of both these crimes that has happened, but I think the judgments of these crimes are rooted in the way that gender is looked at the society. Because here is one woman employed and working in late night shifts where, we have always, time and again this comes, right? Women claiming public spaces or women claiming professional spaces where odd hours they have to work and the safety and the concerns. And here is a crime that has been committed. And the way that the crime has been committed, it's rarest of the rare, right? Anup, I don't know how many other cases we have seen like this where this level of brutality has happened that has shocked the nation to this level. And why did she become a victim? Just because of a gender, right? That's the only reason that she lost her life there. When it comes to Greeshma's case, the way that you want to kill your lover to enter into another marriage, that itself shows that the gender perspective of the whole society. Why would you go to such an extent to kill your ex-lover to enter into another relationship? Whereas what must have compelled her, and from the moment the judgment starts, we hear about sexual intercourse. I think almost every paragraph there is about the way that they have secretly got married and had sexual intercourse. Well, if they're in relationship, sexual intercourse is the norm, right? Why is it so big that there is a, that he has to state in every line that there was sexual intercourse? And she went to this extent to eliminate an ex-lover. What does that mean? Does that mean that in some ways heard that he had digital evidence of their relationship status?
But the judge says that there was no. So basically, Greeshma did say that Sharon was threatening her,
Right.
but the judge says there is no proof
no
for
evidence
that. There's
of
no evidence
evidence
for
of
that,
any such. So there are so many reasons where such digital evidence must have been destroyed or could not be produced, or for whatever reasons. But if a woman has to go to an extent to finish a boyfriend and so that she can enter another relationship, it itself talks about something seriously sick about the society. And are we just going to think that we'll send her to death penalty, and the issue that the underlying issue, or what must have triggered this, is going to disappear from the society? No.
Nandini, something that Anup was mentioning, that one thing that people say, like I've seen all headlines also, both from West Bengal and Kerala, saying that what is the kind of message we are sending by not sending Sanjay Roy to death penalty, and the stringent message we are sending by sending Greeshma to the gallows. Now, if that was the case, in the last execution, the last death penalty India executed was of the Delhi gang rape convicts, right? Then rapes should have stopped or reduced in this country if that is the case, right? Despite research that this is not a deterrent, why do you think we cling on to this?
There is a demand for this justice, and they think capital punishment seems to. What people don't understand is, I've had conversations with a lot of people, asking why they want, because they don't consider the rarest of the rare. I mean, understood that there is people can't understand the clear definition or what the courts need to apply when deciding. But in general, there is this thirst for revenge, right? If to give a example, I was speaking about this earlier. There was a sensational case in Karnataka in the 2000s when this woman Shubha Shankar Narayan, she was accused of killing her fiance of 4 days. So it was all very middle class, upper middle class. It grabbed a lot of attention because a woman, actually, she was in love with somebody else, and her alliance was fixed with this person Girish. And what she did was, barely 4 days later, she went out with him on the outer ring road, and under the pretext of watching some planes land, and she had him attacked. It was a brutal attack. He was attacked in the head, he was bludgeoned in the head, and he died a few days later. Now, in that case, public was very emotional. They couldn't believe a woman could have done it in the first place, and they absolutely wanted death sentence. They were baying for her blood. But the trial court, it was a fast track court. When they gave her life imprisonment to her and her two accomplices, including the person that she was supposedly in love with. Now, when she appealed in High Court, I don't know if you were even, maybe even you would have been there. It was 2010 when the High Court was hearing her appeal. At that time, even some of the lawyers were so outraged. They just wanted to come out for her blood. There were pamphlets released in the High Court corridors saying that, Shubha should get death penalty. She should not be allowed. It's almost as if, the High Court is conspiring to acquit her, and, this killer will go away free. It's very difficult to understand, but the High Court eventually upheld the trial court decision, and that the life imprisonment stood. So, which in retrospect, you understand that is the right thing, because which is why when I read the Greeshma verdict, that was the first thing that popped into my head. Hey, there was almost a similar case, and this is what they did. But people are going to be baying by blood as if by killing this person that this problem itself goes away. It does not. There is an aspect of gender, like Leena mentioned. It's when a woman does it, my God, are the knives out for the woman, saying, how can you do this? How can you? So, yeah, it's a study.
There is also this in a progressive society, Anup, Dhanya, that we always say death penalty have no place, like in a modern society, that it should function on the reformative principle. But even with guidelines after guidelines, remissions after remissions, reversals after reversals, we see overwhelmingly death penalty being given by magistrate courts. Anup, why do you think, after having worked so long in this field, why do you think that people don't step back and see if this is the necessary?
And I have one more thing to add to that, Anup. So you can just take both these together. So, for example, a lot of people will be aware of the Uttara case, right? Where the husband, Suraj, he first used a viper snake, then he made a cobra enter their house, and then the cobra bites Uttara and she dies. He got life imprisonment, right? People might have been saying that give him death penalty, but the fact is that the judge did give him life imprisonment. That also is very brutal. And just in Greeshma's case, where she tried to poison him once, even in that case, the husband did try to kill previously once. When it did not happen, he tried for the second time. So my concern, as the non-lawyers in the room, me, Nandini, or the people who are listening, is that when we look at these judgments, this is so subjective, right? It depends on the mood of the judge, on what the judge's morality is. What is the interpretation of the law here? And like Leena said, and you yourself said, so many acquittals, commutations, why are we seeing this? Should I not be concerned that this is like judge ke dimag, for the North Indian viewers, judge ke dimag mein jo chal raha hai, like that? Yeah.
Anup, I just have one more question to add to it. Sorry, this is for you.
Anup is like,
When
not and no more.
Oh.
But yes, go on, go on.
So when these trial courts give such judgments, which will inevitably, especially death sentences, I'm also thinking about the burden on higher courts, right? I mean, you have Supreme Court deciding on bail of something that has been settled in the trial court. Doesn't this inevitably add so much to their caseload?
No, I think the reason why the trial courts do it, I think they function in a very different local context, right? As being in the districts, the sessions court, and the it's and we can't discount that local reality for those judges, and they are thinking, and is what I have heard repeatedly, is that okay, I'm going to give you the harshest punishment that's possible, be it a murder, or if it's a high profile murder or whatever, I'm going to give you the death sentence. Anyway, the high courts and the Supreme Court is willing to reverse these things. A fairer decision will be taken up there. At least I am safe from these local pressures. Then I'm going to give the death sentence, right? And the reversal rates prove that, right? In terms of the subjectivity, I think when you focus on the brutality of the crime alone, it is like a proxy for the subjectivity, right? The way you say, oh, this is so brutal. All in that senses, I would assume most murders are brutal. If you wanted to write the facts of any murder case, you could write it in a manner that make it seem extremely brutal and gruesome and dastardly. And that's fine. I mean, but that is precisely why the test is not that, right? And I honestly think that Amnesty International, while they did this fantastic work analyzing precisely this problem in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, they called it the lethal lottery, right? And it is exactly that. It is a lethal lottery. It depends on which crime has gotten that kind of attention, which has that local pressure being created. What is the judge's predilection on this, right? And this struggle for some sort of predictability, consistency is something that we've really tried over decades and decades, and we are not achieving it. And the truth is, we will not achieve it. It will be a proxy for that subjectivity, right? When judges don't want to give the death sentence, they will show more fidelity to the law, like we saw in the RG Kar judgment. And when they want to give the death sentence, the law is a hurdle in that path, right? The existing law is an hurdle in that path. It makes it quite difficult to give the death sentence. And then what judges do in the trial court is just ignore the judgments of the Supreme Court that create that hurdle. So that's what's happening. And and we really don't want to be promoting this culture of subjective adjudication. It really does us no favors. Sorry, I'm not sure if I missed.
Yeah, you took all the questions, Anup. So in the beginning, we introduced Anup saying that Project 39A, their work has resulted in 24 acquittals and 49 commutations. I wanted to quickly explain what is that work, Anup. And in fact, the News Minute had worked with Project 39A on one story. I would suggest that you read it. It was, I think, it's been my pet project for many years that we should look back at death penalty, life imprisonment, etc. Because I had once been to US and seen some of the journalism projects they run, in which journalists and lawyers sit together and they study evidences in death penalties, and a lot of cases have been reversed in the US. So I never had money to do the project, and that's when Anup and a journalist approached us saying that they've already done it. It was about a ripper, a man who was accused of killing more than one or two women, and he had already been sentenced to death penalty. So the reporter Nidhish MK went back to all the evidence in the case. So the story does not say whether this ripper is innocent or not, but it says the evidence which the police gave. Like, for example, there was a woman who was robbed and her gold jewelry was taken. So Nidhish finds that the gold jewelry which was produced in court was not her jewelry, but her family was just asked to lie that that's her jewelry. So a lot of things he find how police just planted that evidence, and we leave it to the court's discretion to use that story and that evidence the reporters collected. So what is the work that Project 39A has done, and why did you all manage to get 24 acquittals and 49 commutations?
No, it is that it's true of the world over. Wherever there is a death penalty, people who are sentenced to death are extremely poor, right? And as a result, the kind of legal representation that they get is not the best. And very often, the evidence is the kind of objective scrutiny that it must receive, because of the kind of high profile cases these tend to be in their local context, don't receive that kind of scrutiny, which we then push for in the high courts and in the Supreme Court. And the statistic that I quoted earlier, that out of every 100 death sentences, about 35 to 40% are resulting in acquittals, is really a shocking indictment of the system, right? Because imagine, you're not going from a death sentence to a life imprisonment. You're going from death sentence saying, okay, release this guy, right? And even in the commutations, I think what we're able to do is present facets of the accused person before the court. We undertake very detailed mitigation investigations into the life histories of the people that we are representing, and then present it before the court. And very rarely is now, what do we know about Greeshma, right? What about Greeshma was presented before this judge? I don't know. I'm sure the lawyer tried their best. I don't know, because I've only read the judgment. But the judge does not tell you what about Greeshma's life and what kind of person she is, what has been her behavior in prison. None of that. The judge has, either the lawyer has not presented it, or the judge has not brought it on record in the judgment, right? But those are the kinds of things that we have made a constitutional commitment, that we are interested in the life of the accused as well, and that information needs to be brought on board. And bringing that information on board is not an easy task. It is a resource intensive task, and some might say, oh, now this person has murdered somebody also. On top of that, you want to go and understand their life and bring their life history and create sympathy for them. That's a rather silly way of understanding what the law is doing. But that's what we do, right? We spend a lot of time investigating the lives of our clients, who, even if they are guilty, we need to make the court understand who these people are, so that they can take a informed call on what punishment to be given.
Any final thoughts, Leena, on the two judgments? Because we are also looking, I think we need to address a bit more about Kolkata, where people feel that this judgment was not good enough, that the guy did deserve death penalty.
Well, it is upon the public to, agree or disagree with what the court is delivering as a judgment. But for me, these examples of these cases puts my two big pet peeves. One is that, like how the Ripper case that you worked with, Anup, says, the criminal investigation system of this country is broken. How evidences are created in this country, how evidences are produced in this country, how an accused and his or her life stories are presented before the court. This is all this is all broken so badly that the criminal justice system of this country is a farce. I think I'll not get tried for saying that. I think it's an accepted fact. And the whole judicial system's attention somehow is focused on the Supreme Court and the high courts of this country, whereas the massive funding has to go to how trial courts function, because they are the people who are actually giving relief to the multitudes of people who are knocking on the doors of justice in a country like India, where very few influential people with power, money in their hands can go to a high court or a Supreme Court, but it's the trial court that is the people's court. But how badly staffed, how poorly educated some of the judges are, how badly the cases are presented, how even the quality of the lawyers that go to it, they don't have clear-cut understanding of what happens at a higher courts that this case can go to appeal to. So this is a very broken system we are talking about, and unfortunately there is I don't see that changing on the ground anytime soon, because all the attention is about high court and Supreme Court, even in a legal reporting. Anup, I see you nodding and smile, because this is the unfortunate reality that we as legal reporters have been trying to talk about.
I'll quickly close this, but Anup, the criminal investigation, both this. The very fact, I keep saying India runs on luck, but look at two aspects in both these cases. One is, in the Kolkata case, the DNA sample was contaminated. There was actually a female DNA found, which is of very less quantity. Other than the accused and the victim, there's a third DNA found of a female, and the DNA is contaminated. So the judge is saying the reason could be that the bed on which the postmortem is done is not cleaned, is not sanitized before a postmortem, and that people do not have gloves. Even if the gloves are there, it's reuse, so it could have been somebody else's DNA. And in Greeshma's case, she is subjected to a medical test because she has said that she has had sexual intercourse. And I don't know, the judge is not even asking, like, why did you do that? Right, Anup?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. You're bang on point there, Danya. I think in the RG Kar case, when this comes to the High Court and the Supreme Court, the DNA report is going to come under a lot of scrutiny, right? And I think that is a big, big weak point in the evidence, right? And it's already acknowledged that there is contamination, right? So let's see where this goes. But I just want to make a broader point that on the crisis in the criminal justice system, this is a system that does not work for victims, and neither does it work for accused, right? And it's as difficult to file an FIR, and especially for women, children, getting a fair investigation, getting a timely, effective investigation that results in prosecutions is extremely difficult. So victims also suffer. At the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, custodial torture, custodial deaths are also a harsh reality of our system, right? So at both ends of the criminal justice system, people have it really bad. And, the problem we seem to, even our judges propagate this thinking that somehow if you take away rights of the accused, victims will be better off, is such a terrible, terrible way of viewing this in sort of extremities. It is not a zero-sum game. What you need to protect victims' rights is very different from what you need to do to protect accused rights. The solution for victims' justice can't be lesser and lesser rights for the accused. They require very different solutions.
Initially, when we used to write a lot about death penalty should not be there, I mean, that's my personal thought. A lot of people at the News Minute may perhaps think that there are some cases where the death penalty is deserved, right? So people used to ask me, what about Dashwant? Dashwant is a young man who had raped a 7-year-old child in Chennai and murdered her. And that was a case we had followed very closely because the parents used to work with us on that case, like to bring out certain things, right? So people would ask, would you not want Dashwant to have death penalty? No, because I don't believe that democratic countries or civilized countries should be handing out death as punishment. So yeah, thank you very much, Anup, and I hope people...
Dhanya, just one thing, at some point, if you have the opportunity, you should ask your listeners, right, that as a response to sexual violence in society, which measures would they think are most effective, right? And I think the death sentence or harsher punishments will come pretty low on that priority list. But when you ask the same question in the specifics of a particular case, our retributive instinct takes over. Right? Whereas if you ask it as a broader policy question, what do you do to address sexual violence or prevent sexual violence in society? Harsher punishments will be pretty low on that list, right?
Yeah, so please write to me, write to southcentral@thenewsminute.com what Anup just told you, and I'll read out a few of the replies in the next episode because it's also very important to understand what our audience thinks, right? And not just the good ones, I'll also read the ones which are abusing us or not at all agreeing with us. So we'll move on to the next discussion now. It's about Prime Minister cares or PM cares. It's of course not a South India only topic, but it's for all the nation that this matters. And joining us to talk about this is Poonam Agarwal. She's a senior journalist, independent journalist, very familiar for most of you, I'm sure, because she's done a lot of work, a lot of very commendable work on electoral bonds. In fact, Poonam's work has really exposed how opaque the government of India is. Welcome, Poonam, to the show.
Thank you, Dhanya.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and Nandini, who's joining us in the show today. Nandini did an investigation last year with two colleagues from News Laundry and Cora Abraham from the News Minute, where we looked at how every time there's a tax raid, the donations for the BJP were going up. And in fact, I thought that work was quite path-breaking because when the electoral bond data came, the first thing that people were looking at is how many companies which were raided were giving money to the party in power, right? That's not just the BJP, but any other state party also in power. Poonam, I want to come to you first. The financial statements have been put out by PM Cares, but it's bare minimum. That's a story that you did for the News Minute also. Tell us about all the financial statements till now, what does it have and what does it not have?
So, Dhanya, let's keep it simple for the readers. The details of the audit report, which is being uploaded on the PM Cares Fund website, anybody can access that report. The problem with this audit report that has been uploaded is the fact that it's a 2-page audit report. Per financial year has a 2-page audit report. And till now, what we have is the audit report of 2022 and 23. That is the last. We still don't have 23 and 24 financial year audit report. Point 1. Secondly, the pages of each financial report only gives us the 2-3 facts like opening balance, the receipt, the donation received by PM Cares, expenditures made by PM Cares with different subheads, and the closing balance of each year. The problem with it is that if you closely look at the audit report, at the end, the auditor has mentioned that with all these financial year audit report, attached are the financial statement, which runs into 1 to 11 page for some year, for 1 to 10 pages, maybe 10 to 15 pages is the average which we have seen. Now, the point is why these financial statements have not been uploaded. That is the problem that we have tried to highlight through this article, which is published in the News Minute. Now, these financial statements, why are these important? Because they contain the bare bones, as in the details of the observation of the auditor, where did the finance come from, who donated, the donor's name probably, the details of the donation, and where the expenses were made. Because if you see in the audit report, there are some headers which mention about that certain amount was spent on oxygen cylinders, on ventilators during COVID period. Now, we know that, okay, fine, this number of money was spent, but where, which hospital, who got the payments? These are the details which we need to know. These are the details which are mentioned in the financial statement. I spoke to a few chartered accountants. They said that these financial statements make you realize whether the audit has been done properly, all the documents, whether they were shared by the individual or the company with the chartered accountant, whether there are any errors in the balance sheet or not. So that is the reason why the financial statement is important. Now, we have not seen these financial statements because it has not been made public. That is where the problem of transparency comes in. Why do we need to know these details? Because donations were made by us as well. We as a citizen, many people donated during COVID. PM Cares, the main agenda behind establishing PM Cares was to deal with pandemic. Now, when this was established, the government, the Prime Minister, everybody reached out to the people and institutions and private companies, even the government employees. They were made to donate part of their salaries. So when donation has come from different places, why people do not have the right to know? Secondly, it is if you file an RTI, you cannot get any response because they say it's a trust. Now, why is it a trust when it is run by Prime Minister's office? The trustee is the Prime Minister himself. Then the reason, because the website says that it is registered under the Trust Act. Fine, but why you are not taking it under the RTI Act? So these are the questions which have been repeatedly raised ever since it has been established. Multiple articles have been done, but today what we are seeing is that even the audit report is not complete. So the access to complete information as far as the financial transactions are concerned is still not in the public domain.
So I think the answers to most of this from the government or the supporters would be trust in Modi ji. Why do you guys want to know what is the audit report? It must have been used for something good, right? Something good for the nation. But that apart, Nandini, this whole PM Cares fund has been problematic right from the beginning. No RTI access, and multiple times the government has changed what is the fund about. They've even said that it's not a government-run fund, right? So it has been problematic from the word go.
Correct. So it's also similar to, as Poonam also pointed out in her story, it's very similar to PM National Relief Fund. Now, that was set up in 1948 to serve people who were suffering from partition. And then it moved on to other purposes, which is similar as now the PM Cares. So you have two parallel funds. Both are opaque now. We don't know who's putting in the money. We don't know where it is going, right? In the time where we have fought with this government to know about source of funding for electoral bonds, we had to find out where the trusts were. You have electoral trusts which were giving tremendous amounts of money, and then you have donations. And this is not small change, these are huge amounts of money. So obviously there is an attempt every year, constantly, right from 2020 when it was formed, this PM Cares. There has been an attempt, because they collected more than 3,000 crores in the first month alone. Where is this money going? Who is paying? So because of they talk about transparency, and these are the questions people are constantly asking. They're going to court. They're trying various channels to get this government to give us some information. And the only information available now in the public domain is what is collated through, say, press releases from the Information Bureau, or maybe a question asked in the parliament and there is an answer given. We are scrambling for sources because there is nothing said. But there is transparency. We need to know where the money is going, because ultimately we don't know what is it being used for. There is a chunk they say they have received. There is a chunk they say is going out. Beyond that, what? So if you're calling yourself a public charitable trust, and as she pointed out, that, they have a .gov.in, it is run out of the PMO. In fact, it's the bureaucrats who run. Now, there are trustees like a Sudha Murthy, who became a Rajya Sabha MP last year. There is somebody from Piramal, who is Mukesh Ambani's son-in-law. Piramal. Now, he paid just before 2019. In 2019, he had paid 20 crores to the BJP. He is on this advisory. There is certainly bound to be a conflict of interest. Is that what they're trying to hide? We know this present dispensation doesn't like questions, but every act of theirs does give rise to a lot of questions. So yes, people want to know, but so far they have just blocked every step of the way.
So present dispensation does not like questions, does not like transparency, and does not like data. There's a let me explain show that Pooja did last week on what all are the data that the government doesn't want us to get. But Poonam, see, there are two problems here, right? One is when the audit reports are so bare minimum, we don't know two things. One is who is giving the money. Now, when we talk about crores and crores of money being given, okay, fine, it is for it's for COVID or whatever it is, but there can be a quid pro quo aspect to this, wherein I'm giving 100 crores to the PM Care Fund because I know that the Prime Minister will be happy with me, right? And then what do I get in return? Like till today, we don't actually know where Adani puts in a lot of his money. We don't know whether it's in electoral bonds or trust because we have not seen any evidence of Adani putting money there. The second part is, the first part is who's putting money. The second question about PM Cares is that where is this money going? We only know very bare minimum, okay, this much for beds, this much for ventilators, etc. But who are the companies getting this tender? How are these companies chosen? What was the kind of money given to each? Did they actually, complete the tender? Were those ventilators given? None of this data is in front of the public, which have given the money.
Yeah, Dhanya. And secondly, the third problem is also that now that officially pandemic is over, COVID as we know, and what will happen to this money? Over 6,000 crore rupees is lying in PM Cares, which, as per the closing statement of the last audit report 22-23, what will happen to that money? That's the third question, because the whole idea behind setting it up was to deal with the pandemic. As you rightly said, we do not know the minute details. Who are the donors? When did they donate? Because if you remember, when electoral bond data was out, TNM did a lot of story with News Laundry and other media organization. What we pulled out, the first thing which we tried to pull out, the date of transaction. When was it donated? To the political party. Which political party? Was there any clash between the contract that they got from the government? Was there any quid pro quo? So the exchange of hand or the donation which was done through electoral bonds, the timing was very crucial. Now in this audit report, what we do not know, when did they receive the money and from whom? And at the same time, we cannot really assess who actually got the contract, who were the players involved in getting the contract, who were the makers of the ventilators or the oxygen cylinders, whether those orders were placed at the right time. Because if you remember, during the pandemic, the second wave especially, questions were raised on the timing, the date of release of the fund for the ventilators, for the oxygen cylinders, for the vaccines. There was a lot of hue and cry. People forget. People have short-term memory. They forget these things. But second wave was like a monster. People were running around for hospitals, for medical care. That was a crucial time. We want to know whether the government was on their feet before the second wave hit, or they started acting while the second wave was going on. These are some facts which we can get only if we have the date, the release date, when were the payments made. Only then we can find out whether there was any sort of delay by the government agencies in releasing funds or placing orders or procuring machines. What was the reason? So without that financial statement, we are not in a position to find out these details. And I do not know, is this the reason they are not releasing it? What is the reason they are not releasing it? I seriously do not know.
So the audit reports, Poonam, if I'm not mistaken, have been released recently for 2020-23, right?
Yes, it was released in December, mid-December.
I mean, just a joke, but we had an income tax search quite a few years ago. To all the people who are listening to the news minute for the first time, we were the income tax sleuths had come here, and we had the case going on for 3 years, and it in fact went on for 3.5 years because the pandemic was going on and some of the cases were getting prolonged. But of course, there was nothing against us, so they had to shut down the case. But it was a sort of harassment. We get GST notices from the state for 100 rupees. 100 rupees. And here you're talking about PM Cares not giving their financial statements for 2023-24, 2023-24, even now, right? I mean, we have literally no idea where this money goes. But Leena, since we always have to talk about the courts, this is a fund which the court also has given a lot of leeway for. The court never opened it up for RTI. So is there any hope of justice from the court?
Well, what happened with the electoral bond story? Like when we thought that once it declares it as an unconstitutional affair, there would be plethora of cases opening up where we would find like what has happened, the quid pro quo, the extortion techniques happened, and why, and the monetary transactions would be looked into by courts. But none of that followed up, right? So we talked about how this government is against data and against multiple other things. But one another thing that they do not like is continuing the Nehruvian legacy, right? So, but they do that same thing in a different name. So the PM Relief Fund was there. They didn't like the idea of going ahead with something that Nehru had established, and then they brought up with the PM Care funds. But what we now want to know is that though this came during the COVID era and there was a centralization of buying ventilators and dispersing it, why didn't the certain accountability things, everything runs on Modi ji ke bharose, right? The money that you collect,
That's the word, Modi ji ke bharose.
right? So so there is a health ministry under the government. Why wasn't a special task force created to get these ventilators to procure, and why wasn't it not announced how this was procured and how this was distributed? But it's completely that information is not there. Anything that will kind of build a public trust in the way the government functions is not done, because everything runs on Modi ji ke bharose. And so that's the same way that how these funds are being spent, or whether they should be available for auditing, isn't a big the opposition tried to raise this issue in the parliament, but nothing came out of it, because sort of that didn't in the long run, Modi ji felt that wouldn't affect his public image at all. So what we want to know is that COVID is done and over, and this many funds have been has been collected. How do we not know that the same things that were happening with the electoral bond story, where there was quid pro quo happening, there was extortion techniques being employed? How is it not being employed? Because here is the prime minister sitting there, and along with the home minister, finance minister, and defense minister, right? They are the four people who are managing this. How the PM cares operate? They are not using it to whatever political needs that they have in front of them. So this big question lies open in front of the public, and we don't have answers to that.
But Nandini, we have other institutions like the CAG, for instance, right, which can ask for an audit of this. I mean, from whatever I know, there are several, all the CM relief funds are audited, like Kerala, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu. I've seen a lot of states which put out very detailed audit reports, and also, I mean, they're also criticized for using their, funds in a not so good manner. In fact, Kerala is currently facing a controversy. But the point is, they are putting it out there. Now, this Modi ji ke bharose, how long can this go on, and why are other institutions not intervening in this?
I'll just get back to the court. At one point, I read in one case where they were again asking for transparency in PM Cares. The court said that, fund collected for PM Cares are entirely different funds, and there's no occasion for you to, for them to release it. So the courts also have kind of stayed away. There have been futile efforts. The thing is, we have, in the absence of data, especially under this union government, there is so much absence of data. We are almost holding on so tightly to CAG reports because they are the only ones telling us something about a lot of things happening. Poonam, I wanted to ask, because PM Cares and the National Relief Fund have independent auditors, the same company, right? SARC and Associates. I don't even know how common that is. How often does a government hire independent auditors for it? Why is it not done by the CAG? Because CAG does have the powers to seek an audit.
Why has PM Cares been kept out of CAG ambit, Poonam?
Well, that's something the government needs to answer, but this is something needs to be looked into. You rightly pointed out, because they can come under the CAG. I spoke to a former CAG officer, and he said, and I have written in the article, that PM Cares Fund can be audited under Section 21 and 22 of DPC Act. And under this section, the CAG could demand the auditors to look into the finances of PM Cares. So definitely CAG can audit the PM Cares Fund. There's no reason it should be handed over to a private company. But then why it is being done? Of course, the questions are, it is from day one, the questions were raised on the audit, and why it is not being handed over. Considering that they do not want to reply under RTI, giving it over to CAG would be like inviting trouble, because CAG, once they get into it, they have to make the entire report public. So, of course, that is one reason which it seems that they did not hand it over to CAG, but CAG could have intervened into it. It's a constitutional body. Let's not forget that. So CAG as a constitutional body, they could have very well demanded a audit of this particular PM Cares Fund. But then again, the legal aspect, which I'm not sure, they could have always said that it's a trust. But then again, the question comes, why government agencies like PMO, the Prime Minister is part of it? And not just that, Dhanya, even, government websites were used to approach different embassies, different high commissions for, advertising PM Cares Fund. The government bodies and institutions were used to advertise these on different platforms. That means taxpayers' money was used into it. So in spite of all these things, why it is not under RTI, why it is not being audited by CAG is a big question which needs to be answered.
There is a response to the RTI. They just say, we are not a public authority. You don't need to know.
I think RTI is like half dead now. RTI is half dead.
That era when you could...
That's a standard one they reply to all RTIs. That's a standard response.
Imagine for this huge amounts coming in, we don't know the criteria for how they decide whom they are going to help and what they are going to help with. We don't know which states it's going to. That's my primary concern. Being in the South, we see this constant tussle between southern states with the union government when it comes to sharing of resources, whether it is relief amounts, whether it is GST share that needs to come back, whether it is projects or infrastructure projects in the South. So where there are non-BJP governments, there is so much friction. So we don't know how much of this money has gone where. And that matters. You have states in the South where the governors, partial to BJP, are actively working against the local governments. So how does it not matter?
No, so I think putting out the funds are problematic in many ways for Modi ji. One is, where did he get the money from? Second, what did he spend it on? Who were the companies who got tender? And which were the states that he helped to the PM cares, right? Because he's PM of the country.
And now they're going to double down on it, is my belief, because electoral bonds doesn't exist anymore. And donations, of course, is open anyway. But now PM Cares is the only thing where we don't know. People can just divert. What was going into electoral bonds can actually be diverted to this, and we would be none the wiser.
Poonam, is that something, a danger that you see?
PM cares, as if you read their about section, it says that it will deal with any sort of natural calamity or any other pandemic, anything related to health. Now, when you're saying that, ever since 2020, we have seen so many natural calamities, but the fund was never used anywhere. At least the audit report doesn't say that. So what is happening? What is the future of PM Cares is something we also should discuss apart from the finances, because I feel that after so many discussions, still we have not reached anywhere, nor does the court want to say anything on this.
So I have a homework for all our audience. A few days ago, we published Poonam's story on the News Minute saying that why are PM financial statements so bare minimum, right? 2 days after Poonam published the story, now nobody was bothered about the PM Cares audit reports for 1.5 months, right? December it came. Till Poonam wrote her story, nobody in the world was bothered. The second Poonam story is out, at least 2 big national media has put out stories. Today I saw a YouTube video saying PM Cares is using money for children, la 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 music. And there are also stories. The homework is, please go find out which are those media houses now singing praises about the PM Cares Fund, only because Poonam put that story out there. I want to end this discussion, Poonam, by asking you something not just about PM Cares, but how frustrating is it for you as a journalist working in Delhi now? Because it's always like you're groping in the darkness, right? First it's electoral bonds, and it's something else, And there seems to be very few people are actually wanting to ask these questions. And that also consistently.
I think that's how I'm made now. That's my nature. I don't know how to put it, but I'm a person who is persistent. I like unearthing things. Maybe that gives me. I feel that gives me a kick. Something which I don't find easily. I like it. And the best thing is that since you mentioned these 2 articles, the best is you should see how nicely I'm trolled on Twitter. People suddenly they get active. They come up with all these things. So that's kind of also engaging, I can't do anything about it, but it's fine. See, I feel that it's our job as a journalist, all of us, to ask questions if we do not get the answers and work on it and put it out. And these things matter to all of us because our fund is there. So it is frustrating, but electoral bonds took 6 years, 5-6 years. We got the judgment. It is scrapped. I'm happy. All of us are happy. The data is out. So it's always about persistence. If you ask that, what pays back? Not today, maybe later. Someday PM Cares data will also come out. I'm pretty hopeful. If not in this regime, maybe the next regime, whenever it comes. I don't know.
So before I close, there was a story that I was reading the other day that when Russian dictator Stalin was there was some event in which he made a speech and people were clapping. So people wouldn't stop clapping because who would be the first one to stop clapping, right? So they clapped and they clapped and they clapped for 11 minutes. So one industrialist, or I forgot, some trader was the first person to stop clapping. And everybody in the room apparently just looked at the guy, and slowly others also stopped. But he was persecuted after this. So I sometimes think that when will that internal dissent also come, right? From within the BJP itself, somebody questioning as to we cannot be so opaque that this has to stop at some point of time. It's like that person clapping in Stalin's room, I always feel.
The whole thing about the current regime is that the internal process is so opaque. In the earlier governments, journalists who were working from Delhi, we were able to, there would be some source leaking information, there will be some document leaking out. Here, it doesn't leak out because very few people are involved in decision making. Very few people get access to the certain kind of information. And that is what, again, the Modi ji ke bharose and Tali Bajana, that, what was the line that मेरा risk taking capacity अभी तक पूरा utilize नहीं हुआ है. So that risk taking capacity that we see again and again is what is happening here. So there is not much information that will leak and reach. There is no much documentation of processes. There is no trust. across the spectrum, where he's even trusting his ministers, I doubt, in taking certain kind of decisions. So yeah, let's not go into that area, I guess.
Yeah, Poonam, we'll close, but you can also give your recommendation for the week.
Okay, I can give you recommendation for a series also. Tehran. If people like spy stories, watch Tehran. It's on Apple. Oh, you mean the new one or the old one?
No, you can give any recommendation.
Okay, so Tehran is a spy series. It's a wonderful 2-season series. I'm desperately waiting for the 3rd season. Anybody who's interested in watching Hindi series, he or she can watch Patalo. Very well made. I have not finished it, but I found it really good. Among books, all-time favorite is Autobiography of Yogi. One should read that book. If haven't read it, at least it was a life-changing book for me. So these are the series and the books I can recommend. I think so. This is good enough.
Given the work that I do, all of you, please watch Black Warrant, right, on Netflix, right? And I'm particularly interested in the views of the second episode. Even though we work with death row prisoners, I'm interested what everybody feels at the end of that second episode. Is there a certain discomfort in the manner in which those executions are carried out, or do you feel that, yeah, damn good that these guys were killed? I thought it was done very powerfully and done quite well, of the Bila and Ranga executions, but very curious to hear about people who don't do work in the justice space, whether they felt a sense of unease and discomfort at the end of that episode. Yeah, the second episode. Yeah.
Leena, what is your recommendation?
Okay, I want to recommend a crime series that I really enjoyed watching. I don't know if it's still available to watch, but this is How to Get Away with Murder. That has Viola Davis starring in a very. It's not because it's a procedural but just for the power that she has on screen. I like this, and I would also like to recommend another read, which is looking at all the Trump inauguration and the executive decisions that he have passed. That has caught us all in surprise. There is an Atlantic piece that it's already different how this executive orders has been received now, and how the reception is quite muted compared to what they were. So those are my 2 recommendations for this week.
I will recommend a podcast. I might be late to arrive, but I recently started listening to The Empire, run that is by Anita Anand and William Dalrymple. I love it. It's amazing history, both history, they are both authorities in their own field. It's very anecdotal. It's wonderful. And each episode, it just goes by like this. It hooks you. I mean, it's right now, it's an addiction for me. So check it out. It's really good.
Yeah. My recommendation, of course, is listen to South Central every weekend. Send the links to your family, friends. We are on Apple, we are on Spotify. It's really important that you also leave a rating, because that's when more people discover on these apps. My other recommendation is a book I'm reading now. I'm not fully finished it, but I quite like the flow. It's called A Life in the Shadows by A.S. Dulat. It's about how being a spy is, and I'm going to be interviewing him very soon at a Lit Fest. So that is my recommendation for the week. That's all on South Central this week. I want to thank my producer, Megha Mugundan. Bhuvan is, as I said, in Andaman Nicobar Islands. Don't forget to contribute to that fund. Maria Teresa Raju, who is the note taker and the social media in charge of this episode. Ajay, Vignesh, and Jasim. Thank you to everyone who's listening in. Thank you, Poonam, and thank you, Nandini, and thank you, Leena.